Hello and welcome back to Miniature Odyssey. As I said in the first video I put up, I intend on doing flick throughs and not even reviews of rules, but just kind of my thoughts, whether I like them, what I don't like, what I think is a really interesting mechanic maybe in a rule set. And we'll start doing that now. So the first set I'm going to go through is a brand new set out. That wasn't actually my intention. It's not going to be to chase what is the new set of rules. However, new set of World War II rules come out. I'm going to be interested in it. So what we're going to be looking at today, I did put up a few stills of it in the previous video, is, let's get it right, V for victory, or nobody is calling it 5 for victory. I don't care if that's the intention. Absolutely no one that plays this is going to be calling it 5 for victory. I can guarantee you on that. So this came through the post start of the week, because I'd ordered the bundle with the cards and the tokens. It was held up in customs. It happens, nobody's fault. Didn't really matter. I wasn't going to be rushing out to play it the next day anyway, so a week's delay makes no difference. Again, couldn't be helped. So straight off the bat, if you bought any of the new Saga books or Muskets and Tomahawks, very similar production values, nice hardback. How many pages actually? 120 something? Yeah, 124 pages. Colour throughout, lovely pictures, nice clear tables. I'll do some better close-ups, but it's nice clear font, readable, nice diagrams, really well produced book. Also with it, I ordered the deck of cards. Now I will say I have absolutely no problem buying cards for a game, buying special dice for a game. Doesn't matter to me at all. However, if I'm paying for a deck of cards, I want a box. Like, it sounds silly, but a box to put the cards in would be easier. Now I need to put them in a bag or something. It's just a box. However much extra it adds, give me a box. As I ordered the bundle, I'll show these off in more detail, I think, when we turn the camera around or down. Set of tokens. It's a double set of tokens, double-sided. Decent card, nicely printed. Probably worth the money. What I'm going to do is point the camera at the desk and then show off. I'm not going to do a full flick through and go read out every page of the book or go through every single thing in the book. I'm just going to look at a few key mechanics, so things like the card activation. We'll have a look at the dice mechanics, because similar to games like Force on Force, it uses a dice pool mechanic where rather than, and this plays into the V for victory or 5 for victory, rather than having a +1 modifier, so now you hit on a 4 rather than a 5, or you are -1 to hit a long range, so now it's a 6. You just change the dice, so you use D6s, D8s, D12s. You always need a 5+ for a success, whether it's a hit, a morale check, a save, any other test. So all you're looking for is 5. So just changing the dice obviously improves or worsens your chances. So again, yes, you're going to need to use multiple dice, but I think it's such a clean mechanic of move a dice up, move a dice down. So we'll go through that. And then we'll also look at, as I alluded to in the previous video, we will have a look at the force building, what's good, what I think maybe it's lacking slightly, and how you spend those force points or stars to assemble your forces ready to put on the table. So what I'll do now is flip everything around, get a few things on the table, and we'll have a look at how I think the game is going to play. Now, full disclosure, haven't played it yet, Probably won't get to play it for a month or two by the time we get round to, you know, putting it into our cycle of games. Got plenty of stuff to play it. Obviously, I'll be playing in 20mm because I'm not a heathen. But this isn't going to be someone talking from the experience of having played 15 games of this already since it came out and having really stretched the rules to breaking point. It's just going to be how I think it's going to play out. And I guess the important thing is, does it give the feel of a platoon or squad to platoon level game in World War II? Now, obviously, that's going to feel different to everyone. Your idea of what a World War II game might feel or look like might be based on loads of historic research, might be based on diaries, or it might be based on Hollywood. And obviously, your perspective then of what you're wanting from a game is probably going to vary slightly. I think this is probably pitched somewhere between, I mean, Chain of Command isn't intense simulation, but you can see the simulation aspects of it. And then if you have, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, if you have bolt action at, say, the other end of the scale, this is probably in the middle, and I would say seems to have a feel more akin to representing combined arms, or platoon level with combined arms, like Chain of Command would. However, there's mechanics in the game that you could maybe say are a bit more gamey, similar to how Saga, well, no, not similar to Saga actually, let me take that back. One of my worries was it was going to be Saga in World War II. So it was going to be superpowers, strange abilities, and there isn't any of that. It's much more akin to muskets and tomahawks. So, we have the book. Very nice. Right, let's get down to a few key mechanics. Like I said, I'm not going to roll through the whole book because if you want to read the book, you can buy it. However, let's have a quick look at stuff you get, stuff you need, and the real basics of the game. So, being a Studio Tomahawk game, rather than measuring movement with tape measure, you're going to use movement sticks. Let's actually pop one out. So your movement sticks, same as you would with Saga, very short, medium, long. And they correspond to, it is in centimetres, obviously coming from France. They correspond to 5 centimetres, 10 centimetres, 15 centimetres, and 30 centimetres. Now, for those of us playing in the UK, that if we're going to use a tape measure, it's going to be 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches, and 12 inches. But you get the tokens, so if you wish to use them, and it is actually quite useful when it comes to doing the movement, because you will find that you are putting 2 tokens together or measuring on a road, you're going to be, so I'll quickly show you. Measuring a vehicle on a road, you're going to be putting tokens together to measure distances. So there is a benefit to using the tokens. The other things you get are markers for stress and morale, for activating unit, or to let you know when you've activated units, and then a few other things like objective markers that you put on the table, who captures them. There's an arc of fire token. Now the tokens, I will say, and this is going to sound a bit petty, but the tokens are actually quite nice. However, I think this comes to a case of knowing your market. I would assume that despite being made in, written by a French studio, and I think the tokens, obviously when you have a punch board of tokens, you have one side that's always slightly nicer than the other. So as you can see that, and they've put the French on the nice side, and then you get that curved effect. And is where the English side is. I know it's really petty, but it would have been nice to have the English on the side that's got the cleaner punch to it. However, let's not dwell on that because, like I said, it is a tiny thing. So, the cards. What you get in a card deck is 2 identical sets of 7 cards, and these are going to be your activation cards. Sorry, that wasn't quite the camera, was it? Then you also get 20, if I can pick them up, bonus cards. And what it actually is a deck of 10. Each card is duplicated and in there twice. And you're not going to be using loads of these in the game, but you will be picking them up throughout the game depending on the scenario. You also get a double-sided initiative card, and that's just used on the table to say who's going first if you play a card of the same initiative value, and that's normally dictated by the scenario. Again, you could just use a counter if you wanted, or you could just remember, but it's in the deck. So let's look at how the activation cards work, because I feel that's the important part of the game. As you can see, there is one with nothing on, then the rest of the cards numbered 1 to 7. Play 1 card from your hand. You don't shuffle your hand or anything like that. It's not random. You have all the cards available to you at the start of the turn. You're going to flip them over, and then you're going to compare this initiative value in the top right corner, and whoever's is highest is going to go first. They'll activate and use their card, then the opponent will use theirs, then those cards are discarded. So effectively, you're going to have 7 activations in a turn, and the scenario will dictate the amount of turns that you're going to have in the game. Now, the way these are used is, let's just use this card. So out of those 2 cards, the 7 would go first, which would be, you'd assume, probably the German player would be using the grey ones. And they're going to resolve the actions on that card. Now, that card is assigned to either an individual squad or team. So with your card, you will then choose to activate either a team, because all of the squads are sections are broken down into generally 2 fire teams, and then you will apply both the actions to that team in either order. So in this case, it would be a tactical action and a move action. Or what you may choose to do is apply it to the whole squad. If they're within L or 12 inches of each other, you may choose to play a card which actually has 3 actions on. Now, any squad can have 2 actions played on it. So those 3 actions, effectively, you're going to be able to play 2 actions on one team of the squad, and the other action on another team. Now, what you'll do is you'll put down, there's a token that's red and green. When you've played 1 action on a team, they take a green token. When they've completed their second action and are done for the turn, you'll play a red token on them. Now, this allows for, which I think we're going back to this being a World War II game, this allowing 3 actions spread across 2 teams means that you can begin to introduce, and you are going to have to be careful, because in the deck, I'll show the deck off, that's probably the easiest thing, isn't it? So you've got, that's the special ability card, we'll come to that. So you've got a single action, 1 triple action, a few singles, a few doubles. So what you're going to find is that you can use combined move and fire, which I think is so important to representing a World War II game on the table. Because one of the things I think is really important if you're going to try and say, yes, we're playing a World War II platoon level game, is being able to have these teams operate together so that you have a maneuver element and a fire base element, or the MG team laying down a base of fire while the assault or rifle element moves forward. Being able to combine team actions means that you can have your squads doing that within the turn and at the same time. And I think that means that actually, you will get a feel of a World War II game. The actions themselves are fairly self-explanatory. If it's a picture of a target, it's a fire action, or launch an assault if you're within range to a close assault. If it's an arrow, it's a move action. As with all games, you can move at a normal speed or you can run. Obviously, running precludes things like firing, heavy weapons can't run, etc. Or there's tactical orders, which are things like unlimbering or rallying or falling back. So it's very simple. There's not hundreds of orders you have to remember. I think the nuance is going to come from what you do with them. Then within those actions, there's also reactive fire. Units that have an action remaining can react to any enemy movement or firing. And so you can draw fire from the enemy and use up their actions, but you're going to be at risk yourself. I'm not going to explain how movement works in massive depth, but you have a basic move of S, and you're going to measure from the unit leader, you're going to move him, and then you're going to put the other people around it. Terrain's going to have an influence on that. When it comes to shooting, you will always have to spot a unit, which I quite like. So the game is played on a 4x4 board, but the maximum distance that you can spot is, as a basis, is going to be 3 feet. So there's a table here. So you're going to start being able to spot at 3L, assuming you've got line of sight. And then based on the situation, what you're trying to spot, you're going to move up or down this line. So, for example, if you were trying to spot a small squad of 2 figures who that were behind a wall, you're going to go, okay, 1 squad of 2 figures, because small unit shifts down 1, so now you can only spot them at 2 feet. Oh, and they're behind linear cover. They're going to go down another band, if you will, down to L. So now you're only spotting them at 12 inches or 30 centimeters. And that's how spotting works. And that's always active. My favorite thing on this whole table, that again, I think represents how vulnerable tanks or vehicles can be in close quarter and infantry combat, is that all vehicles, with the exception of open top vehicles, are -1 for their spotting. So being in a tank that's buttoned up and trying to spot infantry and hedgerows and that is going to be hard. And I really like that aspect of that. Just stops those vehicles becoming super weapons and really represents how vulnerable they were without infantry support. So coming back to the card play aspect of the game, there is a ability, or not an ability, there is a rule where you can choose not to play a card for activation, and you may choose to retrieve a card from your discard. And the reason you might want to do that, even though you're going to be losing one of your 7 activations for that turn, is you may find that, you're within movement distance of an objective, but maybe you've got no move cards left in your hand, or maybe you need to get that combined 2 teams to be moving and shooting, but you've used this card. There's only one of the 3 actions cards. So you may choose to forego doing something for an activation to be able to do something more effective on the next activation. Again, I think that's going to be key, because it's going to be giving you choices and restricting what you can do. You may not play all 7 cards. You may choose to only play 5 and take a card back, or take a card back and play it again in the next turn. And the bonus cards, so we'll cover all the cards off because they're a big aspect in the game. these are going to be dictated by the scenario. So, for example, the most basic starter learn the game scenario that's just designed to not have any supports or anything really and be a simple game. It just has 3 objectives that you're going to capture. You simply draw a bonus card each turn, and you're both drawing from the same deck, which is why there's 2 of every bonus card, but it's not 1 deck each. You draw 1 for at the end of every turn for holding an objective. And again, these are not super powerful, but they're going to add something, which are made up of 2 fire teams each. So for the British, it's 1 fire team of a brain gun, corporal or sergeant, it's an SMG wielding person, and 2 riflemen. And the second fire team is the fire team leader with an SMG and then 3 riflemen. For the Germans, it's basically exactly the same actually. So it's a NCO with a submachine gun, 2 riflemen, and an LMG. Now, interestingly, in this, LMGs don't appear to have crews, which I'm not sure is quite right. I would prefer it, especially things like belt-fed LMGs. One of the things is you need 2 people to use them effectively. However, so it's 2 rifles, which will be 2 dice. We have an SMG, which in range has 2 dice. And then we have the LMG, which has 4 dice. And these are all D6 listed for these weapons. You would then look through at any modifiers. And this is where burning and boosting the dice comes into effect. Now, I will admit, I'm not a massive fan of the phrase burning and boosting. It just sounds, I don't know, it reminds me of, I don't know, something like Magic the Gathering or something like that, a really game mechanic. Doesn't matter at all, does it? But just dice modifiers would, I don't know, maybe that will sit better with people that are playing historical games. Who knows? So what we're going to do is look at this table, and as you can imagine, things like being less experienced, already being shaken yourself, shooting at small targets or cover will affect your shooting. At that point, you then have a choice of whether you're going to be making suppressive or direct fire. The difference being, as you can imagine, suppressive fire is going to cause morale or stress to the unit. Direct fire is going to attempt to be killing individuals. Again, I like the fact they put suppressive fire in. It's such a massive part of World War II tactics, suppressing the enemy, that if they hadn't put that in at that point, I'd really be questioning what they've done. But it is there. So we've got a dice pool. If we're just shooting at someone in the open at close range, there's going to be no modifiers at all. So you're just going to be rolling all these dice, looking for 5s. And at that point, you'd have 3 hits. Once you've fired, you'd get a fire token go down next to you, and that's going to make you easier to spot. So again, you have to be conscious of the order of doing things, because you're now going to be an easier target, because that's going to stay on there until you move again. So at this point, the target's going to take their saves. Now, again, you've got a table here. So if the target had run and we're in the open, they'd only be saving on D6, trying to get 5s, remember. However, anything else, they're saving on D8. So if we're going to assume they didn't run. So at this point, oh, yeah, with my rolling, it shouldn't be surprised. Even on D8s, no saves, because look, no 5s. And at that point, 3 figures be killed. So those 3 figures would be dead. However, let's have a look at what would happen if we introduce some cover and how the dice can be modified. So, coming back to the second fire example, let's have the Germans with their LMG firing at this fire team of British. Now this is going to work out slightly differently. For start straight away, we know they're in line of sight and range, so the LMG is going to get 2 dice. The 2 rifles are going to get a dice each. However, the Germans with the MG42, and again this is common to most rules, it does have a quicker rate of fire, and the way they've replicated that is that rather than like the British LMG or even the BAR or whatever gets 4d6, they've changed 2 of the d6 and boosted up to d8. So again, just slightly increasing your chance of getting a 5+. However, let's say that this unit, this fire team, are inexperienced. They're Volksgrenadiers or Osttruppen, whatever. They've been pressed into service. They are not experienced troops. So at this point, we'd come to the table and we'd start looking at what differences we're going to be making to the dice pool. So we look here. So they're a recruit unit, so that's going to be 1 negative modifier. They're also shooting at a unit in, let's say it's heavy cover, because it's a wall. We're now at 3 dice modifiers. Now, interestingly, suppressive fire ignores cover, which makes sense because you're going to be just trying to keep the enemy's heads down. So we start with this dice pool, which obviously is better than the dice pool the British had. However, we're going to apply 3. We're going to be applying 3 modifiers to it. So the first modifier is you reduce the highest dice that's there. So you swap a d8 out for a d6. The second modifier, you do the same again. Swap a d8 out for a d6. And the third modifier, you remove 1 dice from the pool because you can't go down below a d6. So at this point, the Germans, despite having superior firepower through being an inexperienced unit shooting at troops in cover, actually have a much lower chance of getting those 5s. So let's roll the dice. Now it's frustrating, and I guess actually should have been standard because it was no hits. But I do want to demonstrate the better cover save, so for the sake of argument, let's re-roll that. More like it. It's more like one of my opponent's rolls. So 5 hits. Now, 5 hits. However, we've applied heavy cover for the wall. So that means the saves for heavy cover are d12s. So rather than the d8s that the Germans had for being in the open, we're rolling 5 d12s. Again, only looking for 5s. So actually, from all that firepower, only the 1 kill. And that is how shooting works with the dice pools. You're simply going to be moving up from d6s to d8s to d12s and back down again. I think once you've done it once, it's really quick, it's really simple, and it's much easier of just, I need 5s, I need 5s. And that is how, so that's how the dice pool works. Again, this isn't meant to be a how to play, it's just looking at a few key mechanics. So we'll have a quick look at morale, and then I'll just show you how a force is put together, and then we'll wrap up, I think. So just to show off the activation token, as it were, if this shooting was the Germans' first action, you'd put the green marker next to them. When they then use their second action, you flip it to red, and they can take no more activations for that turn. Really simple. Again, you didn't have to use these markers. You could just remember, you could use a dice, you could use a theme token, a tuft of grass, whatever it is, a stone. It's just a way they've added of knowing if your units use 1 action or 2, because your actions may be split across 2 cards. If you're forming part of a group and you're having actions allocated out by leaders, you might only allocate 1 to that team, so they've got another action to use later on in the turn on a different activation card. Right, so stress and morale. What happens is there's a chain that you follow, and your unit moves from confident to shaken to pinned to panicked and then routed. So what happens is you might take a stress token from being shot at, whether it's suppressive fire or from taking casualties, and you take a stress token. At this point, you're still confident. Say you take another stress token. These aren't cumulative, it's 1, 2, not 1 and then added together to make 3. So you've now got 2 stress tokens, but they're green, so they're still confident. If they take another stress token, however, they're now at yellow. And at that point, you put a shaken marker on them as well. So that unit now has 3 stress markers and is shaken. Now, shaken would be 2 burns to your fire actions. So that's 2 negative dice modifiers. So the Germans with their dice pool. In fact, I'll show you how that would influence the dice pool for the Germans. So, as we established earlier, they get 2 dice for the SMG, 2 dice for the rifles, and 2 dice and 2d8s for the MG42. Again, if they're shooting at a unit in cover and they're inexperienced, if we assemble our dice pool the same as we did for the Germans before, but this time taking the stress into effect, we would say the same thing. So inexperienced unit shooting at the British in heavy cover. So straight away we'd do 1 burn for the inexperienced unit, a second burn, or in fact 2 burns for the heavy cover. So what first burn would be to swap the dice over, the next burn would be to remove a dice, and then being shaken, it's 2 more burns. So at that point we're taking away 2 more dice, leaving a dice pool of only 5. So as you can see, the stress has a massive impact, in fact, on a unit's ability to do things. So this is representing the suppressive fire and combined with their morale. So it's a combined way. You know, other people, like, for example, we know the Two Fat Ladies use things like shock, and again, it's that combined thing. It's a mixture of their morale and suppressive fire keeping their heads down. In fact, it's measuring their combat effectiveness almost. How are you going to fix this? You're going to be able to rally. So it's an action you can take as a tactical action. Now, the first thing is it lets you discard the tokens down to the next level. So if they tried to rally, they would discard all the yellow the yellow stress tokens. So that would come off straight away. Then they would be rolling a dice to try and pass. If they passed, then they would go up a morale level. So they'd also lose the shaken. If they fail, they'd stay shaken. However, they would have lost a stress token at least, which means they have improved their situation because they're not as close as they were to going to the next thing. So they're less likely to become pinned on the next time they're shot at or whatever. So this is going to be something that's obviously going up and down throughout the game, same as in lots of things. Bolt action with its pins, chain of command with its shock. It's just another way of doing it. It does mean quite a few markers on the table. And again, maybe people might record this off board, because potentially if you've got a unit that's pinned down, you're going to be having, you know, this many markers next to a unit, and that's a lot of markers. Maybe someone clever somewhere will come up with a dial that you can use that has 3 colours or 4 colours on it, but I'm not sure about this. I like the system. That's a lot of markers to be putting on a table next to a unit. But again, haven't played the game. Maybe you're not going to accumulate that many unless you end up in a really silly position where you're in the open being fired at by lots of units. So maybe it's less of an issue when you actually start playing the game. When it comes to selecting forces, and we're going to use the British infantry, basic infantry platoon or rifle platoon as our example, what you get is you start with a core force here. In this case, for the British, you get a headquarters section or squad with an officer with an SMG, a first sergeant, I'd imagine it would be, with an SMG who's also a leader, a rifleman, and then a figure with a 2-inch mortar. And then you get 2 identical squads, each of 8 men, with a Bren section, with the section leader with an SMG, the Bren gun, and 2 riflemen. Accompanying that, you get the rifle element, which is 3 riflemen and another leader with another SMG. Now, I'm sure they may have picked them up. I'm not convinced about this quite being the right place to start from, should we say. This leader here would have, to my understanding, being issued with a rifle. They're the only people with SMGs would have been the section leader. However, in the field, whether or not people pick them up or were issued them later on, you can represent that. And there is an option to any figure with SMG can have it swapped back for a rifle. So if you're someone that wants to stick with that, you can easily swap that back and give that figure a rifle. So that is your core that you start with. 2 squads, each of 2 teams, and a headquarters. And then, as per the scenario, you're going to be adding support to it. For example, in the first basic scenario, you'll just get 2 support points. And the scenario will also say that these are your fire supports down here. And then there's also, you have access, which is where vehicles come in, with what they call divisional support. A lot of the scenarios will say that you only have access to your direct fire support, which would come at company or your battalion level, or even brigade level, I guess, technically. So, for example, in that first scenario where you get 2 support points, you could add, for 1 support point, you could add a Vickers machine gun team, and you could add a Piat team if you wished. As you can see, the Vickers team comes with 3 men, the Piat team comes with 2. Obviously, if you're playing a scenario that's not going to have vehicles, you're not going to want to bring a Piat team. The other thing you can do, and I quite like this, so all of your squads start under strength. They're below paper strength, and it's probably quite representative of what effective strength they would be operating at. But what you can buy for your points as well is reinforcements. So for 1 reinforcement point, run support point, sorry, you get 3 figures. And those figures can be added to any unit entry that has a grayed out figure. So you could, if you only had 2 support points, you could say, well, I can't afford to buy the 3rd squad for the platoon because that costs 3 support points. However, I can buy 2 lots of reinforcements, which gives me 6 extra figures, which let me get both my squads up to full strength. Now, I really like this because it's a way of, you can then have a paper strength platoon. However, what you're going to really start with is that under strength platoon that's been in the field on the front line. Someone's, they were never at full strength. So I think that's quite representative. And that's how your force is built. It's very simple. It's not massively different from something like Chain of Command, where you get support levels and you can then pick things from those support levels rather than working out individual points of, it's 57 points plus 62 points. You're just picking very, very simple maths, which makes it nice and quick. There's quite a lot of things represented. And vehicles are quite expensive. So things like even a Sherman is 6 support points. The blue symbol is a 5. So it's 6 support points. So for a Sherman to be on the field, you're still going to have to be playing a scenario that's a decent size with a decent level of support. So it is, at its core, an infantry game with vehicles that are available in it. But that's how you put a platoon together. To sum up, V for victory. Like I said, Haven't played it yet, but I am looking forward to getting a game with it sometime soon. And this isn't meant to be a how to play. It's more of a my first impressions, because there just doesn't seem to be much information out there about how it plays. My initial impressions are that it looks like a really fun game. I think that it's got some really clever mechanics. The activation looks interesting. It has quite a detailed morale system. I quite like the way the forces are put together. I will say that I'm not sure some of the choices they've made about, you know, who's got SMGs and that are quite right, but it's easy to change that yourself. It doesn't really matter. I think that you're still going to be able to field a force that's representative of what would have been in the field at the time. You might wonder, who is this game for? I guess is actually a question. You know, World War II squad level. I guess this is more squad level than platoon level, because you start with squads rather than a core platoon. Is not exactly an area that's shy of rule sets that are available. And how does this fit into that? I think that it is more granular than something like bolt action. I think it probably gives a better feel of something like bolt action. The fact that you can have that coordinated maneuver and fire element in the activation means that you can represent, you know, platoon level tactics on the table. I think that the mechanics, I like the dice mechanics from a game point of view. I think it's smart. I think it's nice and easy. I think that some people may be put off by maybe more the fact it has more game mechanics to it, if that makes sense. So things like the dice pulls, the way the activation's done, the way that even things like movement's done with movement sticks. I mean, it's not variable movement. I do like variable movement in a game, but you know, that's how Studio Tomahawk put their games together. So yeah, I mean, this was just my initial look at it, a flick through the book, trying to demonstrate a few, I think, key mechanics to the game. I mean, if you played it and you liked it, I guess comment, let me know what you thought of it. If I get a game at some point, then I might, I might come back and give my thoughts on it. I can't see it replacing, for me, Chain of Command or Battle Group, which again are two different games, but they give me what I want from World War II gaming in the scales that I choose to do it. However, I definitely want to give this a go, because I think it's going to be a fun game on the table. So yeah, if you played it, leave a comment and say whether you did or didn't like it, I guess. And if there's anything I've got horribly wrong in my overview, please let me know. Okay? Thanks for watching.